folks, and welcome to this week's show. My special guest today is Peter.
Hello.
And this week, as you can see in the background, we're talking about the only band that matters, to coin a phrase, The Clash. And we're going to review the five Clash albums from 1977 to 1982 in terms of their release, although, of course, they formed in 76. And we're going to be not including Cut the Crap, because it literally is crap and it's not a Clash album as far as I'm concerned. Anything that doesn't include Mick Jones cannot be a Clash album, bearing in mind he wrote many of the tunes. So cheek to call it a Clash album. And in fact, many respects, they could have called one of the big Audio Dynamite albums a Clash album, really, because you've got Strummer and Jones on it, you know, in terms of the songwriting. But we'll come to that when we come to it. So,
okay.
Peter, when did you first get the Clash then?
I came to them actually quite late. Because I was quite young at the time, there was a limited amount of finances, and I had to pick the albums that I could afford to buy, and I didn't really I knew the Clash and I loved what I'd heard, and then I had a crunchy tape of the first album, but it wasn't really until like 92 or something that I fell hard. It suddenly came into focus for me. It might have been a bit earlier than that. It might have been a bit late. No, it wouldn't have been later. Might have been a bit earlier. But anyway, as I say, I did come to them later because, as there was only so much money, and, there was so much stuff that I wanted to buy.
That's a fair point. As I mentioned on our single show, folks, please watch the Clash Top 10 Songs show. And we'll keep mentioning it because there's certain, obviously, songs off the albums in it. I got the Clash really young. And my friend Jazzy Oliver, and his brother Stevie, who's a good friend of mine, when I was kids, we used to go into their room and they had like a Clash poster on the wall. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, from like 78, I think it was. And well, the first album I ever bought, and I bought in London, was London Calling. And I bought it March, something like that, 1980. Brought it back all the way on the bus home, at the back of the bus, the school bus, because we'd done a trip down to London. And I played it. I didn't like it. Didn't like it because it wasn't punky, and I thought, oh, I don't like it. But obviously, as time went on, you suddenly realise that it's magnificent. But I won't go too much into it at the minute because it'll reveal my ratings. So yeah, I actually got them quite youngish, because there were certain songs that I'd loved that before I bought the album. I like Tommy Gunn, for example, and I Fought the Law, all that sort of stuff, White Riot, songs that I just thought were great songs, I thought, wow, proper punky band. But of course, they were much, much more than that, and we'll come into that as we go along. So for me, Clash, the Clash are a top 10 band for me, my top 10 favourite artists. Absolutely love them, listen to them regularly. It's been an absolute treat to sort of go back over the albums and actually, in some cases, discover some songs again, which has been just marvelous. So, folks, before we dive into it, we'll look at the rankings, and as you can see on the charts here, 5 stars, as you can obviously tell, is a masterpiece. 4.5 is an essential album. 4, excellent. 3.5, very good. 3 is good album. 2.5, fair. 2, weak. 1.5 is very poor. 1 is awful. 0.5 is don't bother. We won't have any 0.5s because we don't have Cut the Crap on here. So there you have it. So Peter, what have you got in at number 5?
Okay, well, it's we always say it, don't we? It's not an easy choice. It'll change from one day to the next. But today, even though having listened to it today, I absolutely love it. It's Combat Rock, number 5 for me. Although it contains my very favourite Clash song, Straight to Hell. Although I do prefer the full version. That's such a magnificent song. But there's just like car jamming and Atom Tan, Sean Flynn, it's a bit like it's just a bit patchy for me. Actually, no, Atom Tan I really like. What am I talking about? I love Overpowered by Funk. That's just brilliant. You know what? You look at the track listing and it's, kicking off with Know Your Rights is just pure quality. I'm changing my mind as I speak. I used to not like Death is a Star, but actually, like, if you kind of play all their albums in order and it's the last song that you listen to that is actually a Clash song, because we're not counting Cut the Crap, it's a sad way to end. But yeah, so there's plenty on this album to love, but it doesn't have as many big hitters as some of the later ones. So I'm going for it's a great album. I think it's 3 stars.
Okay, yeah. So 3's like a good album, yeah.
Do you know what? It's 3.5. It's 3.5.
3.5.
I can't go 3 stars.
Yeah.
That's 60%. No.
Yeah. 3.5 stars it is, Peter. I think that's fair enough. Well, for mine, I've my number 5, I've got Give 'Em Enough Rope, which, like yourself as well, I've got 3.5 stars. Recorded March to April 78. This is the first album with Topper. Topper Headon. I always thought it was Topper Headon. And even the band members call him Topper Headon on shows, but I've seen him being interviewed recently and he called himself Topper Headon. So obviously we've got to respect his name, obviously. So Topper Headon it is. For me, it's the best sounding Clash album. Sandy Pearlman engineers it magnificently, and I know a lot of people don't like it because they think it's overproduced. I think it sounds fantastic. I really do. The album actually got number 2, which I couldn't believe it when I read it in the UK charts.
Really?
I believe so. I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. It's got arguably the greatest opening 3 tracks on any Clash album, with Safe European Home, English Civil War, and Tommy Gun. I mean, bloody hell, talk about hitting you hard with 3 absolute barnstormers. It's an incredible opening. I mean, Safe European Home, I've on the top 10 show. Please watch it. Might get a mention. And I'll just say that it comes in like 2 sledgehammers hitting you about their experiences in Jamaica. And then you've got like the English Civil War based on the old folk tune there, which they rewrote. And that's marvelous. And then Tommy Gun, a song about, how terrorist groups at the Barter Meinhof Brigade and the Red Brigade, are sort of, worshipped and looked upon, by various and reported on by various newspapers, and Strummer sort of mocking the whole thing as being pathetic, which I thought was great. So there are some great songs on this album. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Stay Free is one of my favorite ever Clash songs. And I say on the other show again, it's about Mick Jones, and it's almost like a love story to his best mate, Robin Banks. I mean, Robin Banks is a great name, isn't it? And about the fact that in Robin's time, Robin ended up in prison, and obviously the whole thing, Stay Free, and but them coming out getting out, and you got the line, we'll burn it fucking down to a cinder, which is just one of the greatest lines in music for me. It's just a glorious song about spending time in Brixton. So there are some really, truly great songs on it. And actually, I'm going to say it finishes with a great song, All the Young Punks is fantastic. It's a really great song to finish the album with. But there's a number of filler tracks. Julie's been working for the Drug Squad, a famous event that happened in the late 70s with regards to the drugs thing. Guns on the Roof, about the Clash shooting pigeons, if I recall rightly. Drug Stabbing Time, it's all right. They're all right songs. None of them are great, though. They're just all right. And there are songs that they recorded at the time or within a period of time before the album came out that could have easily been released on this album. You got like White Man and Hammersmith Palais, for example, could have easily been on this. Gates of the West, Clash City Rockers. There's so many tracks that could have been on this album, and in my opinion, should have been. And please watch the reimagined version of this album that'll be released soon. You will see what I think this album could have been quite comfortably a 5-star album, an absolute classic. But there are too many fillery type tracks, dare I say it, for me. And so that's why it gets 3.5 stars. It's a good album. It's a very good album, but it's not quite great. And it's because of those tracks, because sometimes I might skip on if I'm listening to those tracks. Like I listened to it the other day and I thought, please try and like Julie's been with the Drug Squad. And like, I just can't. It's just all right. So 3.5 stars. That's my number 5. What have you got at number 4?
Well, I've got the same. Give them enough rope. And yeah, it's 3.5 stars also from me. Really interchangeable with Combat Rock, and I'm actually thinking I should probably have swapped them around. But anyway, we're done, and it proves the point that they are interchangeable. I pretty much agree entirely with what you say, except for I'll swap you. I will swap you Guns on the Roof for All the Young Punks. I can't stand All the Young Punks. There's something.
Wow.
I know. There's something about it that is a bit like fingernails down the blackboard for me. It's just like no. It's my least favorite track on the album, which is I'm shocked.
I'm absolutely shocked. I love it. Anyway, go on.
I love Guns on the Roof. I think it's an absolute blinder. But I mean, other than that, I completely agree with everything you've just said. It is a patchy album, and like even the weak tracks are still good little songs. When you're comparing it to, say, maybe some of the later Ramones stuff, it's just it just is that it is that kind of thing. It's got a little bit of Clash by numbers to it. And yeah, Julie's been working for the Drug Squad is just it's just no. That's a no from me. So yeah, I can't really add anything that to what you said. Other than also, I completely agree with you that Clash City Rockers and other things could have been on there. This could have been, could have been a contender.
Yeah.
But still, it's a good album, So yeah, 3.5 stars.
Right. Well, my number 4. Oh God, this was a tough one. This one, because this could easily be a 5-star album if, and this is where it's given away, if it had been a single or even a double album, not a bloody triple album. It is Sandinista, which came out in December 1980. Originally, the Clash were going to release 12 singles that year. They were going to release a single every month, and the record company freaked out and didn't like the whole idea of it. So the Clash just only released Bank Robber and then just sort of kept whatever they were doing and then released a triple album. They'd have been better off doing the singles, but there you have it. Many Seas of Folly, and I've said, yeah, it could have been a great single album. It really could have been unbelievable, or even a good double album if they'd included Black Market Clash, which came out in 1980 as a 10-inch vinyl record. If I remember rightly, I had the 10-inch cover with Don Letts on the front. Which was fantastic. It's got some really great tracks on it. In terms of the reggae versions like Armageddon Time and stuff there, and the heavy dub versions like Bank Robber and that, just brilliant. They should have easily have been on the album, but that's another thing. But the album just it spirals out of control. It's just far too many tracks on it. It mixes lots of styles. It mixes rockabilly, reggae, dub, pop, rock. Even got like a world feel to it as well. It's a really experimental album. I think it's possibly the album that's maybe grown the most over the years for people in terms of being able to get into various tracks. And we were talking before the show there, when we were like, if we were to pick our single version of this album or even double, there are about 7, 8, 9 tracks that we'd agree on, and then we'd split our opinions in terms of what songs would happen. I think most people are like that. They'll go, "Oh, I'd have that," and you go, "Really? Oh, I think it's crap." And I think that's maybe the sort of beauty of it. But I will say I would scrap definitely the last 2 sides of the album. Just Do I really want to hear Mickey Gallagher's Kids Singing Career Opportunities? As nice as
Oh,
it is,
no,
no.
no, no.
You know, so it was, you know, as I say, recorded in London and Jamaica, Manchester, New York. It also features again Mickey Gallagher, who was on London Calling out the Blockheads, but it also has Norman Watt Roy on, certainly on the Magnificent Seven, and you can hear his incredible bass playing on it. He's just some bass player. And they kicked off apparently because they claimed that they sort of wrote the main riff for it, and they didn't get any songwriting credits. I mean, the bass line is exceptional on it, I have to say. Whatever the truth is, I don't know. So for me, it's too long. I think it's unlistenable in terms of getting from one end to the other in one go. I don't know anybody who's ever done it. I'd be surprised if the band's ever managed it, you know. There was a single sampler released at one point, and the sampler vinyl, I remember having the sampler vinyl when it came out, and it had, the track listing was Police on Me Back, which is an odd track to start with, but it is an opener, but there you have it. Somebody Got Murdered, for me, one of the best songs that they ever wrote. The Call Up, which I think is fantastic. Washington Bullets, I'll go into that in a minute. Ivan Meets G.I. Joe, which I love. Hitsville, I love. Hitsville, UK. Up in Heaven, not for me. Magnificent Seven, The Leader, which I really like. I like Jungle Partner. And One More Time, great. And The Sound of Sinners. I wouldn't have that on, but there you have it. We all have different thoughts and different tracks. I would have had a number of those, although I have to say there are a number of those are really great tracks. I'll just briefly mention, just to be quick as I can here. I briefly mentioned Washington Bullets. Now, that to me is a song that's almost a flavour of this is what our next album's going to be like, because that could have easily been on Combat Rock. It's just a clear linear sort of move from one thing to another, and it could easily have done it. But there are some great songs on there. I mean, Police on My Back, the Equals song is great. I really like Corner Soul, which is a big favourite of mine. Strummer in a sorrowful mood as he's contemplating how the punk movement sort of turned into that oi movement. Some of the stuff I actually quite liked, some of it, but not all of it. But then it was associated with like that sort of load of right-wing dicks as well, wasn't it? You know, and he's clearly not happy with that as well. And so he's contemplating that in the lyrics. As I say before there, the Washington Bullets has got that combat rock feel. So does Charlie Don't Surf, of course. Which is from the film, isn't it? What's the film again? Apocalypse Now. So which clearly massively influences combat rock. So there are stuff on it that I really love. I personally would have made this much more a dub reggae groove album with a few obviously different song genres thrown in, and I would have focused on that, and I would have probably made it a double. Is the way I would have done it, and I think it could have been unbelievable. A really great experimental album. But there's just too much on it. There's too much. It gets 4 stars. It does get 4 stars, but there's just too much on it for the lack of cohesion on it. So there you go. That's my choice. Well, what have you got next, Peter? What's your number 3?
Well, again, I'm following you.
Oh,
My
well,
number 3 is Sandinista. I will disagree that the third disc goes out the window, because there's some on there that I like. I like the Street Parade, Kingston of Ice, Living in Fame, Silicon on Sapphire. You know, there's
I like Kingston on Ice actually. You'll tell her to take it back. Yeah.
Shepherd's Delight, yes, brilliant. The kids' version of Career Opportunities, no, really, really not. I mean, that's unlistenable. But it is a sprawling mess, and sometimes that's okay. Sometimes maybe they just, if the record company had been pushing them around, I can imagine that they weren't the sort of people to enjoy being pushed around. And so, well, if we can't do a single a month, then have that, wallop, triple album, and you're releasing it. And there is a certain kind of elegance in its shambolic sort of ramblings in places. I mean, yeah, there's bits of it that border on the avant-garde. Men's Fourth Hill and Junkie Slip. It's like, whoa, okay, It's just getting strange. But for me, there is a solid double album in here. I think just about. Maybe not. No, there's a. Need to think about it a bit more, maybe, but there is a solid double album in here. I mean, it starts off really powerful. The first side is just, whack, whack, whack. And the first time I heard it, first time I listened to it, I'm like, okay, well, if it keeps going like this, and we've got, 6 sides, it's going to be incredible. But then the second side, starting with Rebel Waltz and Look Here, I was a bit like, oh. But then we get to One More Time, which I discussed in the other show. Absolutely, and One More Dub as well. Putting the two together there for me as well is my chef's kiss. Complete perfection. I just absolutely adore that song. It's such a. It just makes me feel good, and the dub version does as well. That's the sort of song for getting ready to go out, and it really just lifts me. And yeah, there's some absolute complete stonkers on here, but yes, it is shambolic. And if they'd put all of the kind of the less tuneful, slightly avant-garde tracks into one section, it would maybe be more cohesive, but then maybe they didn't want it cohesive. I mean, I think ending the first side with Something About England is kind of jarring. I like Something About England.
The Super song. It's a really good song, but it's a bizarre place to place it, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. After you're.
It's maybe the last track on the album, or the penultimate track on the album. So it's an odd choice, an odd placement.
Maybe it came down to the pressing time, because you'd think with all those the first 5 tracks there, if you'd whacked in Somebody Got Murdered or Police on My Back at the end there, I mean, you couldn't get One More Time or One More Dub, but that would be perfect, but yeah, it's still a full 4 stars for me, and on some days it's 4.5.
Yeah,
when I'm being a bit more, if I'm feeling quite avant-garde, then then fine. If I've been listening to something like Lingua Ignota or Sun or something like that, some kind of drone or something, then you put something like that on and it's like, oh yeah, that's a bit easier to listen to. But yeah, not as The Clash. So yeah, fantastic. Well done. I mean, well done to him for making a triple album as well.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? So yeah, it's definitely could have been a 5-star album without a shadow of a doubt. It could be. So as I say, watch. There will be another show there when I put it together for 10 minutes and I put what I think is the track list now I would like to have seen. And I'm sure we'll all disagree on it, but there you have it.
I'll be
my
interested.
number 3 is Combat Rock, and I've given it 4 stars. Recorded from 1882. Troubled album. Top Hat at this time had become a hardcore heroin addict by the time that they were recording it, and he'd be sacked just before the release of the album. Mick Jones himself was stupidly sacked. I mean, how can you sack the main writer in the band? It's just crazy, isn't it? So, along with him and Strummer as a duo, just incredible as teams of writers. He was sacked at the end of the tour. They should have just had 6 months away from each other, I mean, Jones again wanted it to be a double under the name The Rat Patrol from the Fort Bragg, but agreed to be trimmed down, and Glyn Johns came in and chopped it right down. I mean, Glyn Johns, great producer, did The Who and Faces and all the rest of it. It's got a great feel as an album. It's actually, I think it's a concept album. I see it like almost like Springsteen when he does like the song Born in the USA, which is his, Vietnam rant. And this album's like that. It's like a post-Vietnam album. And
Mm.
you know, Strummer openly admits he was massively influenced by Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, and you can hear it all over this album. I mean, obviously, certain tracks don't have that. Know Your Rights, for example, which is magnificent. It doesn't have that feel, but a lot of the album does. And I'll go in that in a second because I'll talk about certain songs that really fit in. Mainly side two fits in really with that feel. Side one kicks off with Know Your Rights, which is brilliant, as you say. The bit with the guitars at the beginning, down, down, down. It's brilliant. You know, it's the Clash at their political best. You know, about looking after the weakest in society. It's just brilliant. You got other tracks on it there. Obviously, that you've got the hits, Rock the Casbah, which Topper wrote, and Strummer just did the lyrics later on, rewrote the lyrics even. Should I Stay or Should I Go, which was bizarrely got to number one in the UK in 1991 because of the Levi adverts.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
so that it was, I think it was like 9 years after it was released. Red Angel of Dragnet references Taxi Driver
Mhm.
throughout it. I have to say, the version that came out fairly recently with Rankin Roger on, I really like. There's a really cool version with him sort of toasting over the top of it. It's really good. Obviously, Straight to Hell is one of the great masterpieces that the Clash ever wrote, with Topper Headon's bossing over rhythm and that haunting line, and it's got that the whole song about imperialism and American soldiers who left Vietnamese women pregnant. And you got the line "Go straight to hell, boys." What a line that is! Really brilliant. And then I say it just flow into a sort of concept feel, you know. I know they've got other songs that stand out like Overpowered by Funk and that slightly jar against it. But you got songs like Sean Flynn about the missing journalist who's Errol Flynn's son, you know, and obviously was murdered. And that's definitely got that sort of sound. And then Ghetto Defendant as well. It's got that groove and sort of with the special effects on in the background. There's a real feel to it and a real sense of melancholy to it. There's that sort of real sense of loss on the album. And oddly, you talk about Death as a Star at the end there. I always laugh at it because it reminds me of Springtime for Hitler. You know, it goes, and I just sort of laugh at it because it really does sound like Springtime for Hitler. Well, to me, it does anyway. It's got that sort of weird feel about it.
I hadn't thought of that.
So I think it's a fantastic album. I think it's a really great album. Um, I like the artwork as well with Penny Smith again, who seems to do all the Clash artwork. By the way, the artwork of the Clash is amazing. Can I just add to that? Um,
Mhm.
it's a 4 stars album, really, really good album, and the album I've just started listening to again recently because of this, and I've started loving it more. And I think it could easily go higher. So there we have it. So Peter, what have you got in at number 2?
I have got The Clash, the first album, The Clash. Um, but it could have been Sandinista. It could have been Combat Rock. It could have been Give 'Em Enough Rope. Actually, no, it couldn't have been Give 'Em Enough Rope. I definitely think I got that wrong, but never mind. Yeah, I mean, it is one of the Stone Cold Punk classics. You know, it's personally, in my humble opinion, it's outlived Nevermind the Buzzcocks and Damn Damn Damned. You know,
You mean
who
Never
are
Mind the
it's
Bollocks? Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, that's what Jesus. Yeah, never mind the bollocks. It has outlasted those, which were really its kind of sort of main comparisons. It's got the strength of the Banshees, the Scream for me. You know, it's got real guts to it. Although, like, I like Janie Jones, the song Janie Jones, but when you compare that to oh Jesus, brain's gone. Safe European Home. You know, Safe European Home was such a great way to open the second album. If they put White Riot as the first track, then it would have been better for me. But yeah, it's just a solid, straight through, one after the other, helter skelter, you know, straight up punk album, just and the finest quality, you know. Um, Career Opportunities is probably my highlight for the album, really, along with I'm So Bored with the USA. Um, and then you know the hint of what's coming with Police and Thieves. I think um, I think really Janie Jones and Protex Blue are maybe the two that don't phase me that much.
Right, I love them both, but there you have it. Go on. Well, that's
There
what this
you
is all
go.
about, isn't it? Nobody's right. There's no
Yeah,
right opinion.
no, there really isn't. I mean, I like Janie Jones. It's a good
Yeah,
song. I like Protex Blue. It's a good song. You know, if I heard it when I was out somewhere, I'd be like, I love this song.
yeah,
But like when I hold it up against the others, you know, when you're trying to be sort of be critical of something that is damn near perfect, you know, because otherwise I'd just be sitting there saying, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it, you know. um, yeah, it's definitely 4.5 stars for me. Um, it's I really love their dub stuff. You know,
yeah.
that changed my life. So that is why it's not number one. Um, but it just yeah, it does. It tucks in there nicely with you know being one of the most solid punk albums ever committed to vinyl. Um, and and just having so many hooks, you know, just you know, what's my name pops into my head like so many times. I'll be on a bus or something, and I've just got that ringing around my head, you know, and London's Burning, you know, I can just pretty much get the hook of every song, you know, in my head. Um, so yeah, it's pretty damn near perfect for me. So 4.5 stars.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's my number two as well. I'm giving it 5 stars. I think it is brilliant. It's a funny one, which is the greatest punk album. I can't tell you because it'll change on a daily basis. I do love the Bollocks because I just loved it as a kid and had a massive impact on my life as a young'un. I love the first Undertones album. I love the Ramones' first album. Stiff Little
Mm,
Fingers' first two albums are unbelievable. They had a massive effect. So it just depends on what you're into. Buzzcocks first three albums are brilliant, you know. So it just depends. It really does. Um,
and one for me that I always think that gets undernamed is the adverts. The first
yes,
ad.
yes. First album's excellent. We were talking about this the other day.
Ah,
Actually, me and my mate were talking about it the other day and how good and hooky they are. How many hooks are
yeah.
on that, you know? And the other album that never gets mentioned is a punk album. Is the first Stranglers album, which
Oh
Rappers
yeah.
is fantastic. You know, it's
Yeah.
outstanding. So well, that's for another day. That's for another day.
Yes.
Damn, it's great. I love it. Right. So yeah, first album recorded in February '77, and this time it's got Terry Chimes under the pseudonym of Tory Crimes, which always makes you laugh. I have to say, he's a chiropractor now. I could do with him at the minute with my sore neck. There you go. Um, it was mixed and released by CBS in April '77. Mark Perry, the famous writer for Sniffing Glue, famously described the Clash that day that they signed for CBS as the day that Punk died, which I think is just pushing it a touch far. It was produced by Mickey
Drama.
Foot, the old 101 as sound engineer. Got number 12 in the album charts. So for a first album, the number 12 is incredible, really. The iconic artwork, Kate Simon outside the Camden rehearsal rooms. Loads of people have stood there and done the same pose. Terry Chimes isn't on it because he told them he was leaving the band, so they didn't have him on the picture. But I just love the whole album. There's certain tracks in it I love. I mean, I think it's got the perfect start with Ginny Jones. I love that drum beat at the beginning, the Terry Chimes drum beat. I think it's great, and then it comes in the bass and then the guitar. I think it's absolutely perfect opener. There's some just amazing songs on it. I'm So Bored with the USA. White Riot, the garage sound and mix. I have to say I prefer the single version, but there you have it. Uh, you've seen before. I love Deny, which is about a heroin user. You know, Deny is such a liar. What a song! What great lyrics. What's My Name? Brilliant. 48 Hours, brilliant. Garageland, Charles Shaw Murray described them when he first saw them as just a garage band. And he said it's one of his most happy things that he's ever done because he's realized what a great song it is and what a great band they are. So his initial slaughter of them's turned out to be something that he's really quite proud of because it produced a great song. And it is a great, great song. There are a couple of tracks that I could have done without personally. Remote Control, I'm not a great fan of. It's all right. It's all right. I'm not a massive, and this is maybe heresy to people, I'm not a massive fan of their version of Police and Thieves either. I much prefer the original version, and for me, it's just like, well, it's all right. But it's all right. The US version is a really weird mix, isn't it? It's got stuff like I Fought the Law and stuff on. Songs are like, just don't fit in anywhere at all on the album. They shouldn't be on it, but never mind. The US version's really bizarre. I would have probably had the song 1977 on it. And I would have probably also had their original version of Capital Radio on as well. I think those would have been great. They would have fitted in perfectly with that whole punk ethos in terms of what the album was or is. But it's fast, it's powerful. I love the recording of it because it literally just sounds it's recorded in a room with a band. It's not really well recorded properly. It's not clear. It's not sonically beautiful like the second album. But it's got that garage band sound, and it is absolutely magnificent. Catches a band when they're just electric and literally on fire. But so yeah, it's great. Amphetamine driven, I think, is the phrase I'm going to use. So yeah, it's marvelous. We all know the story of how they came and Strummer quit the 101ers after seeing the Pistols and all that, but it's just brilliant. And they were, without a shadow of a doubt, the most important of all the punk bands because they outlived punk and just moved in a totally different direction. And that's what makes them great. Some bands were unable to do it. Sham 69, for example. I love the singles. I have to say, I'm not going to lie about it. I love some of their singles. But they're a punk band and they were unable to move and do something different. Whereas the better punk bands could do other stuff and moved into other things like SLF or the Ruts would have done if they'd lived a bit longer. But the Clash, without a doubt, just unbelievable. So 5 stars for me. So a quick comment on the musicianship of the Clash. So I mean, just generally, what were your general thoughts?
Well, I mean, like I said about, with London Calling, about them being able to go off into the various styles that make that album. They're only able to do that because of the absolute solid brilliance of them as musicians and writers, and it's the fact that the 4 people were working, in sync with one another completely at the top of their powers, at the top of anyone's powers, at that point. But all of their stuff, they are extremely strong at what they do. And I think, as we've said, they bring out the best in one another because you were just saying earlier that that Joe didn't really do much of any note after the Clash. I'm sure there's stuff there that people feel very fondly about because he's Joe Strummer and people do, but yeah, I think they just, it being the combination of the people and the pure talent.
Yeah, I mean, Mick Jones clearly wrote most of the music, or a lot of the music. I know Strummer wrote a fair chunk of the music as well. I'm not going to put him down. Strummer's a great lyricist. He really is. Jones is a great musician and songsmith, I think is the phrase I would use. Simonon became a really good bass player. Really, after the start and obviously being taught how to play it, became a really good bass player. But the game changer was Topper. Terry Chimes was a good, solid drummer, but Topper was a next level great drummer, and he could play any style: reggae, jazz, funk, blues, whatever you want to play. He could play it, and he added that panache, and that took them from a good band to an outstanding band. And you're only as good as your worst musician. And you're only often as good as your drummer. And the drummer in this case was one of the greatest drummers I think there's been. He never gets mentioned either in the great musician charts, but he's right up there as a drummer. He just grooves like hell, and he's a proper musician. And it was him that helped them go off into different genres and styles. And obviously the band wanted to do that, but he allowed them to because he was able to play it, you know. And the musicianship of the lads, if all four of them, is just top notch. They're not just three chord wonders; they're just marvelous musicians.
I mean, now that you say that about Topper, it does make sense because everything builds on the rhythm section.
Yeah. I mean, Straight to Hell sums it up, doesn't it? So,
perfect
album, and your number one is
London Calling. And well, I mean, it's one of the most perfect albums ever made. It's one of those rare albums that doesn't have one single dud moment on it, really. I'm not a huge fan of Lovers Rock. It's a bit weirdly saccharine to me.
Yeah,
probably turns out to be about something completely twisted. But it's always been that's not a song for me. But other than that, there's just every single track on it is absolutely perfect. We used to have when we worked in the office where there was quite a few Clash fans in there, and we'd have Clash Fridays, and it would always sort of, get later in the day, and by the time we got to London Calling, the volume was really quite loud. It would cause quite a bit of trouble. I think the other thing that's perfect about it is the cover. I mean, this is the time to talk about Penny Smith. That is one of the great rock and roll photos.
Yep. And it's not even in focus. And she complains it's not even in focus, but that sort of encapsulates the band in some respect, doesn't it?
It just doesn't matter. It's just a moment in time. It's fantastic. If not the best rock photo. I mean, it's so iconic. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, London Calling, the song itself might be slightly overplayed, but still kind of no, not really. No, it's not overplayed to the point that I'm like, no, I'll start the album on the second track. Not like something like Love Will Tear Us Apart, where I'm like, I just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
So it's not that.
It also has something, doesn't it? Because I remember the Olympics one, for example, the two songs that they played over and over again, yet every time they kept come on, maybe go, oh, that's fucking great. One was London Calling and one was Heroes. And they were always the two tracks that just kept coming on over and over again. But they seemed to work perfectly,
Yeah. There are some tracks that survive that kind of brutal radio play. And I think London Calling is absolutely one of them. Also, I think the thing that I love about the album, other than going into actual tracks, is that this really pushed me into a whole other realm of music when I first heard it. I think when I first listened and it got to sort of the Guns of Brixton, I was like, this is bonkers. This is reggae. What's going on here? This is all rather odd. But give it a bit of time, and it fell into place, and I could not love it more. There's things in here that are very precious to me, like The Right Profile being about Montgomery Clift.
Yeah.
Just, love that. He was one of my favorite actors of all time. It's so many great films. The subjects to talk about, like Spanish Bombs and the Guns of Brixton, the Card Cheat, that piano part, the Card Cheat is so beautiful as to be heartbreaking. I mean, like an instrumental version of that song as well would just be like you don't need the lyrics for it to break your heart. It's so incredible. Um, and then I mean, it just doesn't stop, does it? I mean, you know, the last four tracks, Four Horsemen, I'm Not Down, Revolution Rock, Train in Vain, wham, 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 wham,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, totally
I'm
agree.
Out. Like I think it's difficult to pull off a double album. They didn't pull off a triple album, but by Ek did they pull off a double album? That, you know, a lot of the time when people release double albums, they do tend to get shambolic.
Yeah.
Uh, and but this, not at all, not in the slightest. You know, if they can you imagine if the record company had said no, it's got to go out as a single album? That
Well,
would have
well,
how
originally they did. And what they did was, I believe, and somebody please message me if I'm wrong here. They agreed as long as they could put out a bonus single. And what they did with the bonus single, that they agreed with the bonus single was going to have 8 tracks. So it ended up coming as a double album because they wanted to ensure that nobody paid more than £5 for the album. Because on my album when I bought it, it had something like pay no more than £5 on the front, and which is great in hindsight, you know. And so that's how they sort of pulled it off. Originally, the record company were not happy with the double album and wanted it to be a single. And as I say, they signed a deal or a contract where they could release a bonus track, and then the bonus track ended up having 8 tracks, and then they realised just put it on the bloody. It came out as a double, just gave in and put it as a double. But the Clash lost money in terms of the fact that I think they either signed away the percentage of money that they could have had because they wanted to make the album cheap enough for people to buy. They did the same with Sandinista as well, you know, which is very admirable. And it just shows you they're not just out to make loads of cash. You know, it was about principles, and it was about people who were into the music and all that and all the right things. You know, that's why they're so great, you know.
yes,
Um,
and it's why that it still sounds so fresh today. You know, all of their material, really,
yeah.
none of it is stale in any way.
No,
Um,
no, I
that's
agree.
sort of, you know, even like the shambolic parts of Sandinista,
Yeah.
that's not something you can level at the Clash. Is that, oh, that got stale? No, no, that's just not. You know, everything they did was so incredibly solid. But this was just the right collection of songs, the right time, right order, you know, the perfect storm. And what a beautiful one.
I agree because for me, like you, I'll just join in if you like. It's for me, it's a 5 star obviously, and it's perfect. There are very few perfect albums, but this
Mm.
is in my top 5 albums of all time. It is literally perfect. I mean, the genres are really great. You know, you got reggae, you got rockabilly. You know, their cover on a brand new Cadillac, which is great. Great cover version. There's ska, there's New Orleans, there's R&B, there's pop, there's lounge jazz, there's a bit of rock in it. It's just, you know, and they cover all sorts of themes, don't they? You know, social displacement, unemployment, racial conflict, drug use, responsibilities as an adult. I mean, Bob Geldof once said they were clever enough to break free from the constraints of being labeled a punk band, and that's what makes them so brilliant.
Mm.
You know, it is just an amazing album. I know Simonon puts a lot of emphasis on the production by Guy Stevens and him being nuts and, you know, and throwing chairs and stuff at them and cymbals and pouring stuff into the piano and stuff and making it really exciting. And I think Jones picked him because he was the producer for Mott the Hoople, and Jones was a massive Mott fan, used to go and follow them,
Right.
and that's why he was the producer. And he does an incredible job. It's just one of those, as you rightly say, one of those great albums. You know, there's a number of covers on it as well. I didn't realize there were 3 covers. I mean, obviously the Vince Taylor brand new Cadillac. Wrong and
Mhm.
Boyo was by a fella called Carlos Alfanos. I'd never heard of him. And uh, which was performed by the Rulers, and Revolution Rock, which is a staccato beat reggae feel song. Yeah, so just brilliant. I mean, as you
I didn't
say,
know. I didn't know Wrong and Boyo was a cover.
yeah, it's an old Scarry cover, yeah. Just great.
Huh.
There's some really, as you say, that mix of reggae and ska, like Rudy Can't Feel, is just brilliant, you know. The Guns of Brixton, which is it's all based on the Jimmy Cliff character and the harder they come. But what
Mm.
people forget as well is this came out in December '79, or in America January '80. That's why it was voted the best album for Rolling Stones in the '80s. Um, it was um, it was just over a year before the Brixton riots. And so it's
Yes,
almost nails that mood a year in advance before it all kicks off. You know, Brixton's a great place as well. If anybody ever gets the chance to go there, I lived there for a year. I loved it. So
it's
yeah,
sterile now.
yeah, but it had an edge, you know,
They,
without a doubt.
it's
Um,
really been gentrified now.
yeah, I can well
Really.
imagine. I will go back.
Oh,
I can well imagine. But it's just brilliant, isn't it? I mean, Clampdown, it's got that, it's about Darwinian capitalist society, but also it's got that fascistic feel to it, hasn't it? And that
mm.
warning about the right wing state and that, and it's so prevalent today. It's absolutely perfect. You know,
It it
it's
ultimately it comes out with just being the Clash,
yeah,
because there's so many styles in there, but in the hands of another band, this would disintegrate into a mess
yeah,
because there are so many different types. But they pull it together, and the core of it is so strong that it can then give them the power to go whichever way they want, you know, and it stays solid throughout.
yeah.
It's just a mighty, mighty feat.
It is. It's perfect. I mean, the lyrics are amazing on it. You know, I talk about London calling, and it's about the apocalypse, the possible apocalypse, and all the rest of it, and various things with regards to nuclear disaster, which had happened at the time. Watch our top 10 song show, folks. I'm not going to go into the lyrics of it. I'm Not Down or Train in Vain. They're all on there. But it's just amazing. I mean, I always loved the line. I never mentioned it in the top 10 show. Death or Glory. It's got a I believe that this has been tested by research. He who fucks nuns will later join the church. That is just an amazing line. I love that line. You know, I'm sure I would have got told off of my mum for listening to that when I was a kid. You know, she would have shouted up, "Turn that off!" You know? But it's just great. The whole
Mhm.
album, it's start to finish, absolute masterpiece. Just an absolute joy to listen to. It doesn't get really any better than London Calling by The Clash. It's that good an album. The real shame is for me, I think they probably had two more great albums left in them. You know, when they split up after Combat Rock, I think there was two more great
Right.
albums left in them. I think if you listen to Big Audio Dynamite's first album, and then the second album, which Strummer co-wrote for a number of the tracks, there's a couple of great songs on there which he's co-wrote. You could see the direction they would have took. And it would have been
Mm.
great. It would have been great with the four of them because the sum of them is, the four of them together are bigger than the individuals,
Yes.
the sum is greater than the part. And I would love to have seen two more albums out of them. I think they had it in them. Two more. No more than that, but two more. But, and I'm also pleased that they didn't reform. Obviously, gutted that Strummer died, of course, but pleased that
Mm.
they never reformed because it doesn't often work.
No, it doesn't work very often. Very rarely. Jane's Addiction, it pulled it off. Sometimes it works in a live setting. It's when
Yeah,
they make new material.
yeah, the Specials
It-
did it. The Specials did it when they reformed in 2009. Is one of the greatest gigs I've ever been to.
Yep.
But there's not many who do. There's really not many who do. And like, I mean, I wouldn't want to see the Jam reform, even though I absolutely love them. I think
Hmm.
it wouldn't have It wouldn't work. So
No,
but there you have it.
I never got to see the Clash, and
Yeah,
that's if there was
same.
the time machine, it would be.
I could have went. I was at that age. I started going gigs that year, and I could have went on the Combat Rock tour. And it's one of those things that I kicked myself on. But there you have it. Anyway, folks, we're going to wrap up the show. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are with regards to the choices. We'd also love to hear what your any sort of points you want to put on. If you've got any anecdotes to go to the gigs, just feel free to leave some comments for us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We've not dived into each album in massive depth because there's loads of stuff out there. We're not going to kill it to death, you know. But thanks for watching the show, folks. Until the next time, look after yourselves from Peter and myself, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.